Shrouded Fable is Pokemon TCG's summer mini set. This set is set to release on August 3rd, which means coincidentally, it will be legal for standard play on August 17th, which is the World Championships. Now in this video today, I'm going to be covering the top 10 most influential cards in this entire set, and we're going to be talking about how they're going to impact the meta going forward. So you're going to want to stick around for the entirety of this video to check it out. So let's hop into the video and see how these cards are going to impact the standard format for the future. Now the first card I want to talk about is Janine Secret Art. Janine Secret Art reads, choose up to 2 dark Pokemon, and for each of those Pokemon, search your deck for a basic dark energy and attach it to that Pokemon. Then shuffle your deck. If you attach energy to your active Pokemon in this way, it's now poisoned. Now this can pair with some other cards we'll talk about later on in this video, but it basically acts like a Professor Sada's Vitality, where not only are you going to search and attach energy to 2 different Pokemon, but what's better about this is you can search your deck for energy. We know that energy acceleration has always been a powerful element of Pokemon TCG. If we go back and look at Welder in the format for Sun and Moon's later series, we can see how impactful a card like this could possibly be. Now, with combination of things like Professor Sada, we can see Janine Secret Art being a really good card to put into things like Ancient Box for your Roaring Moons. Now, we're going to see some more cards here that are going to impact the meta a little bit more, so let's hop over to number 9. For number 9, we do have Dartrix. Now, Dartrix, you could see here, being a stage 1 Pokemon, isn't all that powerful on its own. However, when we pair it with all of the other United Wings Pokemon, we can see that this is one more card that can utilize United Wings. Now, not only that, but we know that Charizard EX is going to be a powerhouse in the upcoming format, and this is a grass Pokemon that does hit it for weakness. So pairing it well into your United Wings deck could be a really good finisher for those Charizard decks if you like to play these single prize, low cost decks in the future. Now zoning in at number 8 here is Neutralization Zone. We know that A-Specs can only be played as a one-of in your deck, and this Stadium card is very powerful. We see so many control decks popping up here in the past few months, and this is just one extra tool that they have to their disposal. Now this card reads, prevent all damage done to Pokemon that don't have a rule box, both yours and your opponent, by attacks from your Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. Now, we know that there's a lot of those running around, especially we talked about the newer Pokemon coming out in Stellar Crown going forward past the World Championship meta. So this card could start to play a bigger impact the further and further we go. Now, what's neat about this card is that at the bottom it does have a subtext that reads, this card can't be put into your hand or your deck from the discard pile. So that means that if this card does make its way to the discard pile, we will not be able to get it back for the rest of the game, which obviously is going to be better for those people who hate playing against control style decks. Now, you could play a card like this and beef up one of your non-rule box Pokemon with a couple of other tools, and then just make it that much harder for your opponent to attack into it if they play an all EX or all V style deck. Number 7, Binding Mochi. We do see that Janine will poison your Pokemon if they are dark in the active, and then we have Binding Mochi to kind of follow things up. Now, Binding Mochi is probably one of the strongest tool cards for damage modification that we've seen in quite some time. But what it reads is attacks used by this poison Pokemon the card's attached to do 40 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Now, we know that there's cards out there that are swinging just below the threshold to knock out the bigger Pokemon, but with Binding Mochi applied, as well as some poison damage, coincidentally, we will be able to hit those numbers. Think of it this way, if we have a Regidrago and we're only swinging 240, and we maybe have a poison Pokemon at this point in time, we can then hit 40 more damage to knock it out in one swift hit. There are so many different cards right now available to us to poison our Pokemon, and Janine in the previous list for number 10 is just one of those many cards. We do have cards like the Brute Bonnet we saw come out of the early Scarlet and Violet sets that can also do the same thing to our active Pokemon. So this is going to turn out to be an amazing tool going forward. And we're on to number 6. Petron EX seems to be coming up on everybody's Charizard EX list. It does have the cool ability of subjugating chains that states once during your turn you may switch one of your benched dark Pokemon, except for any Petron EX, with your active Pokemon, and if you do, the new active Pokemon is poisoned. You can't use more than one subjugating chains ability each turn. So what this means is that we can switch our Charizard EX into the active. Maybe we have one on the bench, and we can switch it with one that's taken damage for the following turn. And again, we can pair this with something like Binding Mochi and just annihilate our opponent with the amount of damage output that we have. Now, Petron EX also has an attack, namely Irritated Outburst, that does 60 damage times each prize card our opponent has taken, which, if we're able to attach to Dark, we still have Dark Patch in the format, we can potentially knock some of our own Pokemon out and then donk our opponent at the beginning of the game. This is really, really cool, and I think that this being at number 6 is still a powerful card, but it won't see so much play in the meta going forward. That's why it hasn't made it to the top 5. Now, before going into the top 5 of this video, I did want to give a huge shout out to all of the sponsors that help make the Shuffle Squad possible. You can check all of the links down in the description of this video, like Advanced GG, which has hydration and energy supplements, and there's a discount code in there for you. And then we have PTCGL store, which helps you get codes for Pokemon the Trading Card Game Live, and that way you can start building more and more decks and trying out all of these awesome cards when they do release on the online version of the game. Now, you can also check out Kayfabe Cards, where they have a plethora of all of the new singles that you can use to play in local tournaments or bigger major events. And then also check out GameStop, where they're allowing you to trade in some of your graded cards for some other awesome GameStop product. Now, there's many more links down in the description, so you do yourself a favor and go down there and check them all out before you finish watching this video. All right, we finally made it to the top 5, and we're going to be talking about this supporter card here, Xerosic's Machinations. And I know I might have pronounced it wrong, but it definitely sounds like Imaginations to me, because somebody must have had an awesome imagination to come up with this control card. But it does state your opponent discards cards from their hand until they have 3 cards left, which is absolutely insane, especially for those decks that love to build up a large hand and have multiple options. This is most certainly a control style card where you're having some hand control, which might prove to be a little bit more annoying for those Snorlax decks going forward into the future. But there's so many different elements that this can be paired with. In other cards here too, we think of things like Luxray EX, we think of things like Arbok EX, so many other Pokemon that also disrupt the hand. Aside from this, imagine putting your opponent down to a 3-card hand and then removing maybe even up to 2 more of those cards out of hand. It definitely gives me the Trevenant and Dusknoir Tag Team GX vibes for sure, because this card is absolutely insane and pretty scary to play against. Now, sliding in at number 4, just when you need it, is the Night Stretcher item card. We see that you can put a Pokemon or basic energy card from your discard pile into your hand. What makes this card so powerful is, instead of shuffling cards into your deck that you might need on a pivotal turn, we think of cards like Radiant Charizard. We could just pick it right up out of our discard pile if it does get knocked out, and maybe this only needs 1 fire energy to pop off. We could put it right back on the bench and hopefully slide it into our active to knock something out. We can basically do the same thing with the Blood Moon Ursaluna EX from the most recent set for Twilight Masquerade. There's so many different usages of this card, and aside from being able to choose whether you get a Pokemon or a basic energy, we can see going into the future that this will be used more and more in awesome meta decks. All right, we finally made it to number 3 on the Shrouded Fable hit list here for the top 10 most influential cards, and we have Kyurem coming in that 3rd slot. For Browns, this not so impressive basic 130 hit point Pokemon doesn't look great at first glance, but if we look into the ability Plasma Bane that reads, if your opponent has any cards in their discard pile that have Colress in the name, this Pokemon can use this Trifrost attack for 1 colorless energy. Now we know that every single Lost Box deck out there has at least 1 Colress in it for sure, but we can see how this will just annihilate any sort of Lost Box deck going forward. And then if we look into the Trifrost attack that has a huge energy cost of 2 water, 2 metal, and 1 colorless, very similar to how we played ADP in the past, we have to read the subtext of this attack. It states, discard all energy from this Pokemon, and this attack does 110 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, I know that Manaphy is a pretty big blocker of this attack, but there's so many other ways to get around it, where we can knock Manaphy out, maybe put it into the Lost Zone with Lost City. We do have Canceling Cologne that can just override Manaphy's bench block ability, and then using this in a deck like Regidrago V-Star to copy the Trifrost attack for 1 fire and 2 grass energy is still really good as a finishing move to take a 3 prize turn, or maybe even more if you've damaged a 2 prize Pokemon on your opponent's board. So with this having a spread damage attack as big as it is, it can really annihilate how your opponent's board has been set up and change the game forever. So that's why this card belongs in the top 3. Now this next one's a little bit of a cop-out because it is 3 cards in one, but why not talk about one of the most impactful cards for number 2, which is the Dust Noir line. Now we do start off with Duskull, which is a 60 HP basic psychic Pokemon that has the Come and Get You attack for 1 psychic energy that states put up to 3 Duskull from your discard pile onto your bench. Now we can just siphon through some basic Pokemon if we need to, get them into the discard pile, and then just bring them back in ghostly fashion and put them all out, just like we've seen in some of the other Gardevoir lines and Greninja lines of the past. Moving on to the stage 1 of this evolution line in Dusclops, being it a 90 HP psychic Pokemon, has the ability Cursed Blast. Now this is where these cards start to get powerful. Cursed Blast states once during your turn you may put 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. Well, what a great pair for Charizard EX, where you're knocking your own Pokemon out and you're also placing damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon. Now, if your opponent has any 50 HP Pokemon, they better be scared because you can just pop this thing and take a 2 prize turn potentially. Yes, I know you're giving your opponent 1 prize, but at the end of the game, when we start to play a little bit more Iono, then this card won't necessarily make a difference on your side of the board because you're starting to put yourself in an advantage. Now, where the card gets really powerful is going to be in the stage 2 of this line, which is the Dust Noir itself. Now, I know only 160 HP is not the best right now, but it does also have a Cursed Blast ability that's a little bit more powerful, and this time we get to put 13 damage counters on one of our opponent's Pokemon. So if anything has 130 hit points or less, it is now knocked out, but the same thing goes for your own Dust Noir. Now, are we going to see this played as much as the Dusclops? Probably not, but it does really have a game-changing ability for sure that makes this card the second most impactful in the entirety of Shrouded Fable. And finally, rounding everything off, at the number 1 spot of the most impactful cards in Shrouded Fable is Feend Dippity EX. Now, this card might not look like much. Again, at first glance, this is a 210 basic dark Pokemon that does give up 2 prizes, but we have to look at it a little bit deeper. Now, this card is a draw support card, which has always been impactful in other sets of the Pokemon TCG. If we go back in history and look at things like Shaman EX, we have Dedenne GX, we have Genesect V, and we even have Bibarel now to help us draw with cards. We could look at cards like Crobat V as a basic dark Pokemon as a draw engine too. All of these cards were super impactful, and if we now look at the ability, flip the script, that states once during your turn, if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you may draw 3 cards. You can't use more than one Flip the Script ability each turn, so sorry all of you Mew VMAX fans out there that want to try to just dominate by drawing every card in your deck like you used to with your Genesect V, but Flip the Script is still a really amazing ability. Now, we see so many cards that might even get knocked out pretty easily while taking powerful attacks, and then just being able to draw yourself out of a hole, whether it is an unfair stamp to 2 or an Iono to 1. We see Flip the Script becoming more and more powerful to get out of those comeback situations and just change your whole board state. Now, it does have an attack for 3 colorless energy here that isn't as impactful, but Cruel Arrow does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So eventually, if you're able to attack with it, it could potentially snipe a Pokemon on your opponent's board. So it's not the worst attack in the world, and especially if we're playing this in something like, say, Charizard EX in the future, we will be able to utilize other attacks with 3 colorless as the attack cost. So that's why overall, in the grand scheme of things, I really feel like going further and further into the Pokemon TCG meta, Feend Dippity EX will remain the most impactful card in the Shrouded Fable set. And there you have it. That was my personal take on the top 10 most influential cards of the Shrouded Fable set. Now, if you did agree with me, great. But if you didn't agree with me, let me know what other cards I might have missed down in the comments below. And I love looking at all of these comments and getting back to you. And everybody here that's enjoying the content on the channel also wants to know what cards they might want to pick up themselves to start getting into leagues and getting into these major events and start playing the game a little bit more. Because you all came in here because you love Pokemon, and we love to see this awesome game grow the best that we can. So shout out to you for watching this video in its entirety, and one more time, shout out to all of our sponsors of the Shuffle Squad. We will be here, and remember, if you like content like this, make sure you hit the like button on this video, and then also share it with your friends. You can subscribe to the channel if you want to see a little bit more of me or any of the other pros that are filmed here on our channel, and I will catch you next time here on the Shuffle Squad.
Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.